The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Through the magic of telephones, he is joining us, at least for this first segment of today's edition of Freedom Friday. So let's welcome the daily host of Freedom Friday, Carl Gallups. Welcome.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for having me on my show today.
I was going to ask, how does it feel to be a guest on your own program?
Yeah, well, as you know, I do a lot of radio interviews, so I'm on this side of the line a lot. But it is a bit odd to be a guest on the show where I hear the music come up describing me as the host.
Well, hopefully I can do an okay job, and the audience will not miss you too terribly much, but I know you will be back next Friday.
Well, Mike, I so appreciate you filling in. I know you always do an awesome job, and thank you for those kind words. But thanks for having me on today for this update.
All right. Well, you're hanging out in Washington, D.C., but you're not just there looking at the tourist sites. You're attending CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. What's going on there?
Well, yeah, and much more than attending CPAC. Not only am I not here to look at the sites, although the sites are awesome, I mean, you can see them out the window, but I've spent the better part of today on Capitol Hill in the various governmental chambers in meetings that various VIPs have asked me and Mike Zullo to attend. And so we've been in some pretty intense meetings today. Over the Obama identification scandal as represented by the Sheriff Arpaio investigation. So Lieutenant Mike Zullo and I have been in those meetings, and I think for the first time in the history of this mess, we're getting ready to make some tremendous progress. That's my hope anyway.
Well, that is certainly good news. I have been, in the conversations you and I have had, you have been the eternal optimist, and I have been the eternal pessimist on this, and I've been praying that you're right and I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, I'm only optimistic in this, Mike. Truth will rise to the top. Truth will be known. Truth will win out. My only pessimism is I hope that it's not too late, a day late and a dollar short. In other words, we found out about the truth of Nazi Germany. That eventually came to light. The problem was 6 million people died before finally people began to admit what was going on right under their nose the whole time. So we've got a similar scenario. Of course, people aren't dying like that. I don't mean to compare it that way, but we have a similar scenario in that an obvious crime has been committed that is historic in our nation's history. I'm redundant there. I'm sorry, but it's right in front of people's faces. But we have the evidence. We have the criminal investigation. We have the forensics laboratory sign off on it. Now we finally have the attention. Mike Zullo and I have been working this CPAC floor. We've been pumping hands, talking to people, doing backroom meetings. We finally have the attention of several VIPs, and by all I mean by VIP, I'm talking about people with standing, people who can make something happen. We finally have their attention. We're getting promises that are witnessed promises. I'm not talking about just meeting with someone in a back room who winks at you, but we had a meeting last night for over 2 hours with a VIP surrounded by 2 or 3 other very important people here in Washington who all witnessed the conversation and the promises that were made to us. Then today we went to Capitol Hill at the invitation of another VIP, and he had one of his chief assistants with him, and we had another lengthy meeting, and they have asked us to come back with more information that they've asked for, and we will provide it to them in hard copy. And I think something's going to happen. I think in the next month or two, you're going to see some big things happen in Washington on this case, Mike.
Well, in the case we're talking about, of course, with Mike Zullo being the lead investigator, we're talking about the Obama eligibility case and the likelihood that many of his identifying documents are, in fact, fraudulent. Did it come as a surprise to some of these VIPs? I know who some of them are, and for obvious reasons we're not giving names on the air. I don't know who all of them are, but I know who some of the people you've met with are. Were they surprised at this?
Yes. We can speculate all day long as to why, but now one of the guys was not surprised. It's just that he is relatively new up here, but he's got a lot of power and he's got a good name for himself. But some of them have been here for a while, and we're quite shocked. I don't know how they've been shielded from this information, but once the man, Lieutenant Zula, who's the head of the whole thing, sat down and explained what he had, their jaws were on the ground. It's quite amazing. This is what we've been trying for several years to make happen, and I really think that the Lord is in this, Mike. I mean, Mike Zullo is a believer. He and I both have just asked God to intervene in this, and the next thing you know, people started coming to us. The next thing you know, we're meeting, as I said last night, for a couple of hours today, for an hour or so in meetings on Capitol Hill. And I think things are really beginning to roll along. And if people will keep their promises, I think America is going to see some surprising turns in this in the next couple of months.
One of the recurring themes that I talk about on my program is the ignorance of the American people, how the American people just, by and large, I mean, there are obviously exceptions, listeners to this program, for instance, but the American people, by and large, are ignorant of what is going on around them. And as a result, the government gets away with a tremendous amount that an informed electorate would never let them get away with. But I am astonished that these VIPs, and I really wish I could mention the names, but I understand why I can't. People just have to accept that these are names that would be recognized in the political world. That's as detailed as we will get. I'm amazed these people are ignorant. It's not like this has never been talked about. You talk about it practically every Friday on Freedom Friday. It's all over WorldNet Daily. There are other sources of information. How can these people be blinded to the evidence?
Well, Mike, there are a lot of reasons and speculations, but in being as kind as I can be and as forgiving as I can be, having been up here in Washington now and rubbed elbows with a lot of famous people. I mean, I've shaken the hands of people that you guys see on TV every day, and I've talked to people, and then going up to Capitol Hill. I'm going to tell you something, Mike. There's something very enamoring about this place, and I've kept myself separate from it, but I've just observed it. And people are enamored with themselves. They're enamored with the power. They're enamored with the significance of this place. And I think, well, one of the speakers at CPAC said it the other day. He said Washington, D.C. is 60 square miles surrounded by reality. So in other words, the people that live and work and operate here just don't live in the real world, Mike. It's amazing. It's an amazing dynamic. They just deal in what they deal in here, and the rest of the world is kind of in oblivion to them. It's an amazing thing. It's difficult for me to explain. I know I'm not doing a good job of it, but I think that a lot of people are just caught up in the busyness of what they do. They're caught up in the power of what's going on here. And let's face it, I mean, this is the heartbeat, the epicenter of the number one superpower of the world. And I think that things like this just kind of get shoved into the background, and business as usual goes on. And I think it takes things like what Mike and I are doing, sitting down with the hardcore evidence, getting their attention, sticking your finger in the air and saying, look at my finger, look at me, now follow, focus. And once they focus, once they see it, their jaw hits the ground. Now, that's one of the nicest reasons why they don't know. I've got other reasons, but I don't want to go into that right now.
Well, and I do understand the bubble that is Washington, D.C. I lived in Virginia many, many years ago and would spend a substantial amount of time in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., Wheaton, Silver Spring, Maryland, and so forth, basically the whole D.C. metropolitan area. I know a lot of people that are very well connected politically on both sides of the political spectrum. Obviously, I don't want to give names either. But I understand the bubble that they live in. They're insulated and isolated from reality, and the influence that is exerted upon them seems to blind them to the idealism and patriotism that the rest of the country feels not being in that epicenter.
Yeah. And Mike, I can tell you another dynamic, and I understand this. Look, I'm at CPAC, and I'm watching, and these VIPs, and I mean, they're everything from governors to attorney generals. I mean, I shook hands with several governors last night at a big reception, and attorney generals, and talked to them, and congressmen and senators, and you know, and candidates, and bigwigs in the news, and people that are on television every day. And so what happens? These people are swamped literally every day by everybody that's wanting their attention and wanting to push an agenda. And I watch these people. They're just overwhelmed, Mike, and it's so hard for them to decide what's what. And so several years ago, the disinformation machine of the Democrat Party and the White House, the current White House, decided it was going to label this investigation a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing nuts, the birthers. Well, so you take one of these VIPs and you put them in a crowd of thousands, and all of a sudden they're surrounded by people who are saying, hey, we need to check the identity. We need to, immediately they think, oh, a birther nut. I don't have time for you. Please get out of the way while I talk to someone else. So on a small scale, I understand it, because now that I've done a lot of Tea Party speaking, and now that I'm, on the radio and people know me, I go to conferences where I'm bombarded by people, and everybody has an agenda, and everybody wants to use my name, and everybody wants me on board, and I have to do the same weeding out process, and I'm just a little person. I'm nothing like these people that operate up here. So I think that's another dynamic, Mike. I think they've just been overwhelmed. They were told years ago that this was just a little conspiracy theory nutcase, but now that we finally have the attention of some people and have sat them down and showed them the evidence, they're overwhelmed by it. They understand now that this is real stuff. A real crime has been committed of a magnitude that is historical.
Well, I am one who early on in the eligibility discussion thought that there wasn't proof on either side, and I still believe there's not proof on either side, although there is more evidence that Barack Obama is not eligible than there is evidence that he is. I wouldn't call it proof yet, because it needs to be refuted on the other side, and you weigh, just like in a court of law, the prosecutor makes his case, the defendant makes his case, and there you go. And then you weigh the evidence, and you come out with a verdict. But as the publicity of this has evolved over time, and as they have refused to answer very valid questions, I grew more and more suspicious. Then Sheriff Arpaio and Mike Zullo launched this investigation, not with the intention of proving that he is ineligible, but with the intention of proving that he is eligible, so those very so-called birthers that you're talking about that would confront Sheriff Arpaio in Arizona at these meetings, he could say, we've investigated it, he's legitimate, now stop asking. And lo and behold, wait a minute, they set out to find one thing, and they discovered exactly the opposite.
Mike, you have nailed it. You have nailed it. Arpaio was one of those VIPs in his area that was being bombarded with this request and that request, and this insistence and that insistence. And the birther Tea Party thing was one of those things that he was trying to get rid of, because everywhere he went, he was a media hero. He's been on Fox News. He was famous for the pink underwear and the prisoners, America's toughest sheriff. So he was being bombarded with everybody's agenda. And finally, he brings this investigation team together. Mike Zullo didn't know anything about the birther process when he got involved. He thought it was just a bunch of junk. Two people on the investigation team made it known up front that they were huge Obama supporters and believed that this could all be debunked within minutes. And what happened is the entire team discovered within a few days that they had a crime of historic magnitude on their hands. And even the two people who first described themselves as Obama supporters now call themselves birthers with no shame whatsoever. So the evidence is overwhelming. And not to parse your words, Mike, but I would say this. We do have proof. We do have proof. What we don't have is a ruling.
That's a good way to put it. I'll accept that explanation. Let me ask you this question.
We've got the proof. The proof is 100% in the bag. Now we need a ruling on the proof. And I think we may get it very soon based upon what these VIPs are promising us now that they have seen the evidence.
Well, let's hope so, because I am only interested in the truth. Whichever side the truth takes us, as long as it's the truth, I'm fine with that. Let me ask you this question, Carl, because I got to take a break here. Can you stick around until the bottom of the hour? It'll be about another 9 minutes. Can you do that,
Mike. I will do it, yes.
Okay. We're going to take our first break of the program. When we get back in 2.5 minutes, I'm going to get back on the line with Carl Gallups, the regular host of Freedom Friday. This is Mike Bates just filling in as the guest host. But we're going to ask him and discuss what is going on at CPAC.